Bună ziua, sunt Diana Florescu și astăzi discutăm despre Bitcoin. O să analizăm scenariul în care vor intra și băncile centrale în această piață, o piață de 300 de miliarde de dolari, adică mai mult decât valoarea tuturor DST-urilor emise până în acest moment de Fondul Monetar Internațional. Avem și reforma fiscală din Statele Unite, menită să susțină creșterea economică prin măsuri de relaxare fiscală atât la nivelul individului cât și la nivelul companiei. Iată că această reformă fiscală ar putea fi cadoul de Crăciun pentru economia americană și avem și ceva un pic mai tehnic. Impactul MiFID 2 este un set de reglementări care va intra în vigoare pe 3 ianuarie și vom vedea ce impact are acest set de reglementări, să spunem MiFID 2, la nivelul economiei reale. Vom discuta despre acest subiect cu Artem Trofymenko, este cofondator și director executiv la Brokeraj. Hello and welcome.
Hello.
So, Bitcoin. We're talking about a market which is limited. There cannot be more than 21 million units or something like that. So it's limited, it's growing, it's 2000%, I think, year on year. So that's a lot of appreciation. Is there more room to grow or not?
To start off, I believe that naming Bitcoin the market itself is not exactly correct because that's only one instrument of the market, right? Which the market we can call it as market of cryptocurrencies. Let's not elaborate blockchain, not blockchain. Let's imagine we are talking about cryptocurrencies, right? The question is there room, right? In that price, will it grow more? Well, the price, what is the price? Price, first of all, is how we appreciate certain things, right? Or what value we assign to certain things.
Supply versus demand, right?
Exactly. Well, in the
how
basics.
you balance it.
Exactly. So how do we value things, right? First of all, we value the the purchasing power, but because purchasing power is actually the value equals purchasing power, right? So this wasn't the case, interesting enough, with Bitcoin because it has the value, but you couldn't realize it up until very recently because you couldn't have spent it on as easy as money before, right?
So it didn't touch the real economy, yeah?
I mean, the penetration into the offline economy was very low, right? So you can't, for instance, in Romania, you can't go to a coffee shop and pay for a cup of coffee with Satoshis, right? With Bitcoin. It changes, right?
Yet.
Yeah, exactly. Yet, because it's Romania is like a dark spot on the map right now, right? But when we talk about the price and if there is any room, so it's basically like in many other instruments, it's the value people assign to it, as in the expectation of will it grow or not, right? What helps the price of Bitcoin grow is, as you mentioned correctly, limited supply. Right?
Okay.
And also the utility, right? So what is actually utility of Bitcoin? Why do we need it, right? The first counters to that were that people needed it to pay for drugs on the internet, right? Silk Road, and we went way beyond that right now because right now the main function of Bitcoin, and we don't hear that much, is actually the entry point to cryptocurrency markets. To buy any sort of token right now, to participate in ICO, to buy a token, to actually get involved in it, right? So the first step you take is actually buy Bitcoin, right? And then Bitcoin might not be by far the most interesting instrument right now. It's outdated, it's slow, it's expensive, it's...
Which would you consider it to be? Ethereum or Ethereum, sorry?
The most interesting instrument?
Yeah. Oh. In the cryptocurrency market, or Zcash, or I don't know.
I would say IOTA right now is for me the most interesting idea. Not going very deep in it, it tackles the issues of scalability in the way that cryptocurrencies, blockchain-based cryptocurrencies cannot, right? Because it's actually based not on blockchain, on a different technology, which is to me, I was watching, just off topic, I was watching there's a lot of education right now and it's going mostly on YouTube, and I love it because it's a free education. You don't need to go to university to educate yourself.
You get the courses, the online courses from Oxford or from MIT for free if you want. Yeah, so
you have geeky guys who can do a much better job in explaining things like that for free, right?
Okay.
And I was watching the explanation of IOTA and how that works, and that was incredible. I felt myself so...
Can you mention the source that you...
Absolutely. Maybe if we can put it in... don't remember off the top of my head, but we can put it in the comments.
Yeah, exactly.
Really
because it's going to be interesting. It's very important to... The sources of education are very important to be reliable. So that's why if we can find as many as possible. Going back to...
let me just finish with IOTA so I can make my point. So why IOTA is my pick? Because it's ultimately scalable. It allows for every device in the network to be the actual, transaction processor. Like in Bitcoin and Ethereum, you have miners who process your transactions. And then miners start taking the fees, and if miners cannot cope with the flow, the network gets slow, right? It's very different than IOTA. What IOTA allows you is actually every device to has the processing power of the whole cryptocurrency, which actually the expansion of the market, the expansion of usage of it makes it faster, which is an incredible idea to me. It's so
you can do that from your phone or from your tablet or from your...
IOTA is using all of the devices which are connected to the network. Right, so why is it IOTA? Because of the actual name of it comes from the Internet of Things, right? So, for instance, our like right now, our mobiles, our cameras, even a lot of our devices are connected to the Internet, right? At home, I have something called Google Home. I come back home, I say, "Hey Google, play Spotify," and I don't need to press anything. I don't need to bother myself. I actually, I'm already connected in this regard. But it's only the beginning. You can have your fridge, a refrigerator.
Your washing machine, you're already starting from work, and it's going to be...
And going forward in the future, these machines will be able to supply themselves. For instance, your washing machine will be able to buy detergent from an online store, by itself without you intervening, right? And
before it runs out,
Exactly.
So
and the currency you're going to use for that is something, not maybe necessarily IOTA, but something like IOTA, because it doesn't charge for transactions. So it's a cost-free transactions.
Exactly.
So that was my 5 cents on the cryptocurrency.
Let's go back now to the cryptocurrency market and Bitcoin as an instrument.
Yep.
What role do you think central banks will play in this market? Because we're talking about an institution which is there to regulate the market, to supervise, and it manages the foreign reserves. But we're seeing this instrument which a lot of people say that will become desirable in their portfolios. Do you see that happening in 2018 or in the short term?
In my opinion, we live in a unique time because nothing like that has ever happened before, and it's very intriguing to watch what's going to happen, because we have a new emerging, extremely powerful technology-based asset class. Because it's not really a currency. If you think about it, cryptocurrency is not really a currency.
It's an asset class per se.
In my opinion, yeah, absolutely. It has features, it has traits of, it behaves in the beginning like an equity because it's created by a certain group of people, a company, right? So when it runs out as an ICO, right? So initial coin offering, very similar to IPO.
With an IPO, yeah.
No? Then it actually is valued as a commodity. For instance, Bitcoin is actually equivalent of gold, right?
Digital gold,
But then you can transact with it like a currency. So essentially it amalgamates the features of 3 or more different asset classes and creates an asset class of its own.
And the central banks, do you see them incorporated?
They're scared. In my opinion, if I were, intelligent enough to be a central banker, right, which I aspired long time ago to be, I would have been very cautious and very mindful of this new asset class, right? Because the main, as you mentioned, the main mission of a central bank is to implement fiscal and monetary policies.
Just monetary. There's no fiscal policy with the central banks. No. I think for Romania, that's not,
I might be mistaken. I'll take your word for it.
So it's only the transactions that the authorities
You're right.
do
Monetary
Romania.
policy as in regulating money supply and
By the way, you cannot have monetary policy of the crypto market, right? I mean, you cannot regulate that one.
You do when you create a white paper, when you create a token.
Okay.
You are the one creating the tokenomics
So you did become a central banker in a way, from that perspective.
No, decentral banker. I would say, you know, this. So going back to your point, what's going on with central banks? They are heavily regulated institutions, right? They are, you know, they have laws and they're governed by laws and they only can function within the remits of the laws. Legal framework does not yet exist for accepting cryptocurrency as a
instrument,
as anything, right? As an instrument,
eligible instrument,
as a store of value, as anything, right? It does not in the eyes of law, right? We have it, we can pay with it, you know, we can transact, but in the eyes of law, it doesn't exist yet. So, central banks right now cannot do anything about it. The question is, what's the move, right? Are we going to regulate it? Okay, how are we going to accept it? And then the tricky question is, because it's a decentralized something, right, which means you cannot control it, are they brave enough to actually store it and take the risk on the balance sheet of having it without having any leverage over it, right? If I'm a central banker of Romania, I can regulate, so for instance, the supply and interest rates on Romanian leu, right?
Yes.
No, if I'm a central and if I decide to, okay, I'm going to also have Bitcoin reserves, what am I going to do with it? You know, it doesn't depend on me. It doesn't.
Of course, we're talking about a smart weight, but can you exclude that happening? Because we can see the value of the currencies which make up the special drawing rights. Yeah, there's the G7 currencies. They're devaluating when compared to the cryptocurrencies.
Absolutely.
So you're seeing actually your foreign exchanges, which are used also for trade, for also settling trade arrangements between countries and stuff. So you're seeing that decrease. Even Christine Lagarde mentioned, we should sort of take a look at, you know, sort of, I know there's a mandate and there's a strict eligible instrument list, but do you see it happening? I don't know.
Right now?
Not right now, medium term, 3 to 5 years.
Medium term, still no, providing they are decentralized, right? Because look at the latest move. Because states and central banks are looking at the trend and they have to actually, you know, justify their existence in a way, right? They have to create something. So
have some fees on us, right? Somehow.
Not really. They, for instance, some certain countries. When we have seen examples of Russia, of China, if I'm not mistaken, Venezuela, most recently, coming up with the idea of having a national cryptocurrency, which is a crypto-based yet currency, right? It has nothing to do with this, for instance, Bitcoin concept, right? Because it will be centralized. It will be controlled by the central bank, right? And that I see being, you know, very viable for, you know, to be as a reserve, let's say crypto RON, right? But
now it exists only in dollars, yeah. So as far as I know,
okay,
it's Bitcoin, USD. I don't know if another.
Well, you can exchange it. You can have BTC RON as well. You have Romanian exchanges who are exchanging your RON into BTC.
Oh, okay.
Directly, yeah.
Okay.
It's only if it's a peer-to-peer exchange. It doesn't matter what you exchange. You can exchange sheep for Bitcoin. You can have BTC sheep.
And you have CFDs on that? I mean,
CFDs on BTC RON? I don't. Well, you would need to have a. You'd need to have to resolve a few problems. A price feed, which has to be fast enough, and you need to have resolved an issue of liquidity, which is hedging your exposure to an actual physical exchange, which is very difficult because these are two different realms of technology. CFD business and physical Bitcoin businesses are technology-wise, they are as far as I don't know, basketball and curling.
There is some caution in the market from people like Mark Cuban or Warren Buffett. Yep. They talk about the volatility, which is extremely dangerous. There is also Tony Robbins saying something like, it's like going to Vegas, yeah? So there's a lot of people, so it's two-sided, the market. Some have embraced it and are supporting the Bitcoin, but there are still voices who are cautioning it, cautioning investors. And probably the best message is to invest only the money you can afford to lose. Yeah?
Well, that's just
but that's for every
common
investment.
sense, really. I mean, you know, don't borrow, you know,
don't get a loan
don't mortgage your house to put the money on a high-risk investment, which actually had precedence before in the States. People did mortgage and remortgage their houses to put money in Bitcoin. It was 6 months ago, and they probably managed to upgrade their housing already by this time. But I by no means recommend that.
Okay, so that's important as
but
a sort
the
of
most I think most vocal and how do I put it, categorical statement was coming from JP Morgan's. Is it JP Morgan's? Jamie Dimon?
Yeah,
I
it's
believe
the
JP
CEO.
Morgan, right? CEO.
By the way, my favorite banker in the US.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yes.
right.
Because they played the crisis very well.
No,
They bought a lot of competitors at minimum price, so from my point of view. But he said that.
He actually said that Bitcoin is a fraud. And that was his literal statement, that Bitcoin is a fraud, and it was a bit of rambling on and on about it. And,
a fraud?
A fraud, yes.
That's a bit...
Shmikiriye, as we say.
Yeah, okay.
But the funny thing is that what actually his team behind his back was facilitating in flow of investors' money in the Bitcoin, right?
Oh.
So that was a bit hypocritical.
Yeah, come on, Goldman Sachs does that also from time to time. They issue a certain, with Abacus, we can remember what they did. They tailored one, then they recommended to sell it.
You'd expect those extremely
it.
wealthy and influential people to have slightly more integrity than that, wouldn't you?
Okay, how do you hedge your exposure on Bitcoin?
Well, very simple, right?
As a risk manager, yeah? I mean, as a...
Ooh, that's not very simple. No, that's not simple at all, actually. In what line of business are we talking about?
Let's say you're an asset manager, yeah, of your own account.
All right, so you bought physical cryptocurrency.
Yes, and you have Forex, and you have certificates of deposit, and you have tech on your balance. You have a diversified portfolio. For each, you have 25% of the exposure protected, hedged. How do you hedge the Bitcoin?
Well, first of all, just as a disclaimer, I'm not a financial advisor, neither a risk manager.
No, neither the
so
show
don't take
issues,
don't take my word on it, right? But if I were to manage my own, I would say, first of all, I would allocate funds for crypto investment. Strictly those I can afford, and I'm afraid there is no how do I put it, adequate hedge to cryptocurrencies right now. Let's just look at the mere numbers, right? What can play the same size of a bet the other way around? What can, if Bitcoin rises to 100,000, what can fall that much in value, right? Because, or what can rise as well that much? So you what's a hedge, right? You buy one, you sell the other.
Exactly.
Right? So you cancel out
all
your
different
position.
instruments, yeah, if you
Correct,
can. Yeah.
right? So within the cryptocurrency itself, you can find hedges. You can actually manage your portfolio. If you're looking at cross asset class hedging, I don't think anything will help you.
But we have on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, yeah, and on CBOE we have futures on Bitcoin.
Right.
Why aren't those a hedge?
So, which you mean you trade physical?
Yeah.
Right. You buy physical. You sell derivative.
If you're
right? Obviously that's a good point, and that would it's within
from
the same.
From a risk perspective, you
but
use
it's the
like
same
that.
instrument, right? It's not really a hedge. You just you trade off the same instrument, right? The hedge.
And which costs? The costs are huge, Yeah.
So
Unfortunately.
you just play. You can do it the same. You can do the same. Within one instrument, you can buy certain amount. You can sell certain amount of the same thing, but it doesn't bring any economic rationale, right?
It does, because the derivatives are a lot cheaper than the physical instrument usually. Yeah. So you have leverage, you have margin. That can help.
What is the price of physical instrument? What's the difference? Transaction cost you're talking about? I'm trying to understand your angles.
The requirements. If you look at the physical contract, if you look at a share, you have to pay it all in full. You can buy futures for which you pay a lot less, or an option if you want options on Bitcoin. I haven't heard of existing.
Options would be a very interesting hedging opportunity. Yes.
But who would be doing that? I mean, who would
fund
be?
managers? I would see professionals, but
I don't see that happening anytime soon. But if they become regulated, probably then we'll see an options market.
You can probably see a pair of Bitcoin futures versus Bitcoin options playing out interestingly, right? Hedging futures to futures, it doesn't, from my understand.
No, physical to futures. I was.
Oh, physical to futures is that's okay. Let's dive into physical versus futures, right?
Okay,
For
yes.
a quick example. First of all, maybe I'm reading your questions from the list ahead of you. I didn't intend to do that.
Questions
but
on my list.
Futures, right? What is actually going on with futures, right? Why there is such a hype? Now, futures are there to open up the doors to institutional money. We understand that a hedge fund, a pension fund, they cannot actually, go to they can, but they don't. It's a matter of reality. They don't go to a physical Bitcoin exchange and trade in those. They need.
We put the server in the Treasury Department, to start mining the.
Yeah, first of all, they regulate. They have to collaborate with regulated entities like regulated exchanges, right?
Yeah, of course.
Regulated marketplaces. So that's their entry point. So what's going to happen here, and that's probably one of my biggest theoretical concerns about the development of crypto markets, is that as good as it sounds that we open up doors to institutional money, we opening up doors to institutional level of manipulation as well. Let's play a little role example. CBOT futures, right? Okay. Based in Chicago, right? Based on Gemini exchange, exchange which is not the biggest, the one belonging to Winklevoss brothers, right?
Okay.
So what's the so you can trade both, right? You can trade on Gemini and you can trade on CBOT, right?
Okay.
Right. So imagine you are taking a sizable position in a short position on CBOT, on Bitcoin, right? So you say I want to sell a lot of it, 10 billion, right? So that means you are betting for the price to go down.
That's very hard to even comprehend, at the moment. Is when will it? We're used in finance. What goes up must come down. We're used to economic cycles. We're used to, peak and bottom. Every instrument followed that rule. From November, beginning with November, there was no fall in Bitcoin whatsoever. So that's why it's a bit, I cannot have the courage to imagine myself selling something on Bitcoin right now.
No, I probably didn't articulate myself, right?
Yeah.
My example is that because I'm just, we'll try to explain very briefly, because the Gemini exchange, right, is not the biggest exchange.
It's small.
It's relatively small, and it has on their own pricing, and you could notice that prices on different exchanges differ.
That's true.
Because it's different marketplaces. So that means theoretically that we can come in with a sizable position
and distort the market.
We can, distort the market
and,
and change the price, push it up or down, however we like it, right? So imagine you have a very huge position on derivative, right? And it's one way, and you need only a fraction of that money put in a physical exchange to distort that price. So okay, you're losing on physical, right, with your sizable trade, but you have a massive upside on the derivative side.
Okay, yes.
And I can see that with absence of regulation, I can see that happening,
And that's the power of the institutional player, because that's where the big money is.
Exactly.
You as a retail trader, well, hopefully one day we will be able to, but I don't think that's realistic. Okay, talking about this, there's some brokerage houses who are limiting sort of their exposure to Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general. Why are they doing that?
Risk management. Right. So because of the super high demand, right, and you are not able to hedge your exposure fully, right? If you're not able to hedge your exposure fully, you'll have to not pass it on, but take the risk. And nobody is willing to take the risk right now on cryptocurrencies, right? Because it's a bullish market, everybody goes long, right? So that means if you haven't hedged yourself fully, you are going short, and on that short you can be
not with the positive result.
Damaged.
Damaged, it's a very good word. And talking about regulation, let's talk about a bit of the MiFID II.
Right.
So these are some regulations entering into effect January 3rd. Yeah, it's EU level. Yeah. So basically, what's going on? It's if MiFID I looked only at shares, I think, or things that were on regulated markets. Now every transaction has to be well identifiable. Let's put it this way. There's 50 more fields everybody should fill in for every trade. Cost, it's meant to be more transparent in a way and to bring more confidence in a way and to not have such a fragmented market. What's the impact that you estimate that will have on the market you're active on?
Let's think about it, right? What MiFID does, as you rightfully acknowledged, that's additional regulation, right? It's expansion and elaboration of current existing regulation. It also raises the thresholds of entry to the market, right? So you need to be a more qualified investor to enter financial markets. That means that we...
Wait a second, investor meaning retail?
Retail, yeah.
Okay.
That means, basically institutional investors, they are by default qualified.
Of
right?
course.
We are talking about this affecting retail, at least from my perspective, from where I see it from my point of view. That raises the bar, right? That means that you have to be qualified to a certain level to enter the market. That cuts out a huge chunk of population who, investors who would like to participate, right? But they will have to prove to a broker right now that they can. And that's not sometimes easy, if you haven't had previous experience, try to gain it without, with such high thresholds.
That's not actually a completely con against it. I mean, it's probably helping, people, but how do you start? Wait a second, if you don't have experience, when do you?
Exactly, that is my question, how do you start in a market which is hard to enter?
It's important that it raises the cost, the fees. It's an additional cost which will be transferred somehow to everybody. It's EU level based, but if you are an Asian bank, and you are selling a product to an EU client, then that client needs to be regulated. If you have an option which has as an underlying an European instrument, again, it has to be regulated. So it's a lot of 50 more data fields to be for each trade.
Yeah, imagine that.
I remember when opening accounts, like a couple of, I don't know, let's say, I wouldn't want to be 10 to 15 years ago, with sucks when it was so complicated in Romania, there weren't a lot of them. So when you had some documents, but it wasn't nearly, I can imagine that for each of those things now there's 50 more to take.
What will happen? It's interesting how this will affect cross-industry, right? What the ripples will be. One of the effects will be that more small institutional investors will be looking at spread betting, right? For instance, Romania is not an example yet, but UK is, right? In the UK, you can spread bet on things, right? You can spread bet on the currencies, on equities, on stocks. So you just do gambling, right? Gambling on financial instruments.
Okay.
Which, imagine if your gambling shop, in the corner, right, will start accept...
Like games, like you're gambling on football or something. That's what you mean?
Yeah.
Simple and that should be doing?
That's an alternative. People can turn around and say, okay, why don't we do spread betting instead? Right, and you will push this side of investors who want to participate in financial markets, you'll push them into gambling.
And that's exactly what you don't want.
Yeah, that might be a side effect, yes.
And to finish up in a out in a positive note, so we have in the US the biggest driver for the indexes. We talked about futures. It's sort of a connection there in my head. We have new record highs for all of them, Dow Jones, Standard & Poor's 500, because we have this beautiful fiscal reform, which is actually 1 year since Donald Trump is in power, almost, and he wants to ratify, I hope that's a word in English, to pass on, to sign the bill. Is it going to bring momentum to the markets in the first half of 2018? Is it enough? It will pass, that's for sure.
I don't believe this is as powerful to bring something very, very significant, right? Because let's look at who's the mover of the economy of the US. It's probably the biggest corporates, right?
Yes.
Who are
and they're the ones benefiting,
the biggest influencers, exactly, right? And if we look at how they structure their businesses, right? You'll find out that, for instance, IBM, right, has probably more business going on through its accounts in Ireland, right, which is more tax favorable than, you know, in certain states of US, right? But, you know, obviously it doesn't have this market share in Ireland.
Repatriation of profits, that's what they intend to do.
And what now states in America are doing, you know, certain states, they are not actually now competing to give the best breaks and best conditions to certain companies, inviting them to come, you know, to move to their state, right? So in the corporate world, corporates have this inertia, right? So decision making takes time, right? So after the new tax regime comes in power, it will take, you know, it will have a roll-on effect, not immediately, but, you know,
yeah, it's a delay,
right?
It's
so
a
I
delay
estimate
usually.
a delay, but, you know, we can see that Trump administration is doing everything to, you know, they're putting their stakes on the economy, right?
Yes.
That populism and economy, right? That's the two pillars of this administration.
It's one of the biggest decisions that actually, or let's say, how do you call them, declarations in the campaign that is actually coming true. Yeah, so
it's
this
probably
is
one of the very few achievements so far.
Exactly. There's a lot of populism still in his speech,
right.
But this is something tangible. Individuals will also benefit, of course, the wealthy one the most. Actually, as a percentage, I looked up on a sort of analysis by the Tax Policy Center. The ones from $500 to $1 million, $500,000 to $1 million benefit the most in percentage terms. It's about 4-point-something%. Yeah. So it's for the wealthy in a way. The ones that don't make that much money, of course, they are not.
Tell me, are you not worried yourself about the way how this bill is enacted? When Republican senators actually confess on camera that, well, I had about, you know, I had a few pages to review and I had a few minutes to review the bill, right? So probably, you know, Republicans don't really know in depth what it is.
This is something that has been working upon, I strongly hope, for months now. So it's not something that, you know, he came into power and the second day he came with the fiscal reform, how he did with the orders, executive orders.
But you, as American voter, you trust your, you know, fate in the arms, you know, in the hands of your senator, right? Who hasn't seen the bill.
Talking about that, why are you in Romania?
Good question. I have moved to Romania in late 2014, right, to run a startup project, right? We established a brokerage house in, so that's my knowledge of the industry, of the brokerage industry. We established a brokerage house in Africa, in Nigeria. Which is
Nigeria,
yes, which is still successfully operating, and that was my, you know, business management experience. Why Romania? Well, it's a very interesting place. It's very cost efficient and it's very rich in talents and you know, smart people. So Romania makes a lot of sense to start a business from, you know, exactly from here.
How's it going?
It's going really well. Well, I'm not in that specific business anymore. I moved on and started one of my own. It's a very, very good place for me, for the business, because, as I said, you know, the biggest, most valuable commodity here is people, right? The people you work with, high integrity and very good.
And risks? The biggest risk for operating in Romania?
It's hard to estimate. You know, we also have tax reforms right now going on in Romania, how you pay taxes, etc., etc. I wouldn't go deep in there. I would still say costs of doing business in Romania are quite low in comparison to other countries. We are based here, you know, in the heart of Europe, which, you know, makes a lot of sense to.
Yeah, there's a lot of trade also, and
you know, it would be, you know, in Romania it comes with interesting initiatives, like, for instance, shout out to Startup Nation, right? Which very good initiative. You know, we are actually grantees of the program. Mm-hmm. So I can see some initiatives being implemented.
Okay, so with that positive note, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Într-un fel a fost răspunsul pe care l-am oferit, cum privesc eu, cum a fost făcută reforma fiscală din Statele Unite, apropo de încrederea în senator. Ei, nu intrăm în acel subiect. Astăzi am citit o știre foarte interesantă. O agenție imobiliară, de fapt una mai mare, a anunțat că acceptă Bitcoin ca monedă de schimb în ceea ce privește tranzacțiile imobiliare. Așadar, și noi ne îndreptăm în direcția asta. Este o piață extrem de interesantă, despre care trebuie să citești foarte, foarte, foarte mult. Eu vă urez să aveți o zi frumoasă în continuare și mai ales sărbători fericite!